going to start a new topic today. The new topic is trading places. It's called trading places. It's in Hebrew, actually in Aramaic, it's a concept from the Zohar, which is in Aramaic it's called the chlifu duchtayu. It doesn't matter, you'll see it. I'll give you some pages to see the Aramaic terms. The background for this class is that we have basically three levels of oneness within us. So there's becoming one with ourselves, there's becoming one with other people, and then there's becoming one with God. So these are three levels that we can draw them in correspondence to something that we've talked a lot about and we'll talk much more about also, that we call world, souls, and divinity. This was one of the concepts that the Baal Shem Tov taught himself. It's actually in his famous letter, the one letter that we have from him. And he explains that in everything that you look in the world, you should divide it up into three dimensions: world, souls, and divinity. And each one of them has different processes associated with it, and it's a whole different dimension of reality, and it's also a different dimension of how we relate to ourselves and how we go through our psychological development. So the simple idea here is, first I'll draw out the general correspondence. So let's give you this page here. Pass this around. So the simple idea here is that we usually, when we talk about attaining coherence in the psyche, we talk about inter-inclusion. And inter-inclusion means that before we become aware of Torah, then our understanding is, or our life is based on separateness. And the point of Torah is to bring together and to create coherence, not just between people, but also within the person himself. So usually when a person is not yet working with Torah, so they have a feeling that they have different forces within them that are all driving in different directions. And it's very hard to figure out, so who am I in the end? There's not yet a feeling that you can bring things together and see a coherent picture. So the coherence within myself is what we call inter-inclusion, and it's what the divine soul does for the animal soul. So the best example of inter-inclusion that we go through during the year, for instance, is the Sfirat HaOmer, the counting of the Omer, that we have 49 days. And during those 49 days, the divine soul imparts its point of view on the animal soul. And so every week is one midah, one character trait, that we then divide up into all the other character traits. So we start with loving kindness, with chesed, and then we say, look, you have a lot, because what do people feel? People feel that they're like torn. Sometimes you act this way and sometimes you act that way. So who am I in the end? So it says, no. The fact that you may primarily be a person that acts with loving kindness doesn't mean that you don't also have might within that loving kindness. So you can also discipline your child. That's the classic example. So if a person doesn't understand what's going on in them, they don't understand yet the inter-inclusion, the divine soul hasn't yet imparted on the animal soul an understanding that I'm complex in the sense that to be mature is to come to terms with the fact that each one of my character traits is actually made up of all the others. So you're still in a world of chaos. You feel that you're still in a world, the animal soul's major feeling is one of chaos. And so before people come in contact with Torah, before they certainly come in contact with Chassidus, or at least Kabbalah, but they have this feeling that somehow they're like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. They can't see how this all comes together into one thing. Then we usually explain inter-inclusion to say that this is how you connect to other people, but here we're going to say that it's much, much more basic, that it's how you actually see yourself, how you connect to yourself, how you can live in a world that's not chaotic, but coherent and what we call rectified. So rectification is the ability to see that even though I have opposites in me, that I have opposing forces, opposing character traits, in the end they do form a coherent whole. And what makes them form the coherent whole is the divine soul. Without that, really, the animal soul sort of jumps from one thing to the other. It can't see the totality of this whole structure. Once you introduce, what's the idea behind this? The idea behind this is obviously that even though God is one, there are many opposing forces in the world. So that's the first insight of monotheism. That even though the world seems chaotic, it seems like there's opposing forces and they're all fighting each other, we see that it's not exactly like that. That it's all stemming from one. It's all coming from one. So in the rectified sense, they can learn how to cooperate, because they really do come from the same source. So if I have loving kindness and might and they're fighting each other, so it could be that the easiest solution is to see that both of them come from something higher. They're both the loving kindness and might of loving kindness, or maybe the loving kindness and might of beauty, or loving kindness and might of victory. However it might be in this field. That higher unifying principle, that's what the Torah gives. And it gives it because without understanding that Hashem is one, then you also can't yet understand that the soul is one. You can't yet understand that you're coherent also, even though you seem to have all these opposing forces. So that's the oneness within the person himself, within the individual. And that we call inter-inclusion. Itkalelut is the word, you have it there in Hebrew. Itkalelut is, again, it's just attaining an intrapersonal sense. I think interpersonal, right? Within myself. So it's an interpersonal sense of coherence. That there's oneness here. Even though it seems like there's things that are opposing.
That's what Itkalelut is?
Itkalelut, inter-inclusion.
Okay.
So this is worlds. Why? Because before there was itkalelut, before there was inter-inclusion, I hope we have one left. Do we have one? We actually don't. Wow. I have to give you one.
How about taking one?
It's okay, it's okay. I hope I remember it. Thank you. Okay.
Rabbi, can I ask a quick question about
Sure.
inter-inclusion?
Nobody ever asks questions in the middle, and I'm always like, I need a rest.
Is it inter-inclusion or intra?
No, it's inter-inclusion, because so inter is between them. So I meant really intra. So intra-self, like within yourself, you attain that sense of coherence through inter-inclusion. And we said that this corresponds to what we call worlds, the dimension of worlds. Why? Because one might say that the whole axis on which the... Oh, hello. Welcome. I haven't seen you in so long. I guess you have to get rid of some of the kids at home to show up.
If you feel stuffy, please open the door.
Yeah, it'd be great if you opened it all the way.
Is that okay with everybody? Okay.
So the whole axis on which the Kabbalah of the Arizal revolves is the movement from the world of chaos to the world of rectification. And rectification by the Arizal literally means inter-inclusion. That's what he means. He says in the world of chaos, the Sfirot were one under another. They couldn't see each other. And so there was no ability to create a coherence. It was like the mechanical picture of the universe. That God started something. He's like in the top, on the very top of this line coming down. It's like a sequence of events. So he started everything, and then it just trickles down. But when things just trickle down, there's no connection between the stages. They don't see each other. Each one is just receiving from what's above and passing on to what's below, and there's no real connection. So that is the world of chaos he describes, and that's the 7 kings of Edom that eventually they rule and they pass away and they die. All these vessels shatter, and that's how the person is if he's only left to his animal soul. That things build and they shatter and they build and they shatter, and you don't see any kind of rhyme or reason in the whole thing. And you just feel torn apart all the time. But the Kabbalah of the Arizal, his chiddush, his novel understanding is that there are 3 axes. And now when you put the sfirot along 3 axes, they can begin to see each other and form connections. To the point where he says the full connection is 10 times 10. You have a full partzuf, a full persona that has 100 different elements, and they're all the inter-inclusion of all the 10 within each one of the 10. So you have 10 times 10. And then you get a coherent picture. So this is worlds. So before you even talk about what the soul is, a person has to be okay with themselves. How do you become okay with yourself? Before you even connect to someone else, you first have to be in a rectified world yourself. You have to be able to identify with other people before you even connect with them. That you see that there are elements of them in you also. And that even though the other guy might be, very mighty and powerful, and I'm all about beauty, still there's an aspect of might in my beauty, and there's an aspect of beauty in his might. And so there's an affinity, because I can relate to it. I see that it's also in me. But if you just feel I'm either this or that, then you yourself still live in a world of chaos. It's very difficult to go on to the next stage, which is to connect to someone else. So the first stage is just inter-inclusion. It's just to rectify the self, to have a coherent self. But what we're going to focus on today is what comes after that. And after that, there are 2 levels, which we'll see are actually 8 levels of, actually more than 8, but we'll in the next couple of classes, we'll only cover 8 of them, of what we call connecting to someone else already, and having a relationship with someone else, and being able to work together with someone else. And when you talk about working with someone else, so it's not enough to just be coherent. It's not just enough for you to feel non-chaotic. It's not, you said, you're put together, you're okay, but that doesn't yet mean that you know how to work with someone else. So maybe you won't argue with them, but it's not the same thing as being able to relate in the sense of working together. That already requires something more. And so what we're going to focus on, starting with this today, is this thing called trading places. That the first type of relationship that allows people, or the first type of act that allows people to work together, to really cooperate, and not just remain with their own interests, but in a rectified sense, like in inter-inclusion, is trading places. Is this ability to trade places with the other person altogether. So psychologists use this a lot. You have 2 people sitting, and then you tell them, okay, especially in couples therapy, okay, you sit in her place. And the problem is that usually after a couple of seconds, it doesn't matter that they changed seats. They took the seat with them. It doesn't matter. It's very hard to actually do this. To be able to do this, as we'll see, it's not enough for us to talk about, let's say, the importance of being psychologically normal, fit, coherent. You have to begin to talk about God. If you don't bring God into the story, so trading places becomes impossible. You have to bring it out. So I'll just relate a little story that I've been dealing with the past couple of weeks. A couple that the woman is highly communicative. Like she has incredible communication skills. And before she became a Baal Tshuva, she was going to be an actress. And she has an incredible ability to express herself, and both verbally and physically. Her body speaks what she says. It's like she's very, very expressive. I didn't meet her until recently, but I knew the husband for a few months. And I'm talking to this guy, and he's telling me my wife doesn't want to be with me anymore. She doesn't want this, she doesn't want that, and she wants to divorce me. And I'm listening to him, and I'm using all the regular things that we do in Torah to Nefesh, and I'm coming to the conclusion, look, he's adjusted. He's not crazy, and he's not violent. He's actually a very nice guy, and I asked him to relate his relationship, like how he sees his relationship with his wife, and it's quite rectified, and there's a lot of good things. And I can't put my finger on what is causing all this strife between them. What in the world is going on? So finally, when I recently talked to his wife, it hit me that he has a cognitive disability that was never diagnosed, and that he doesn't understand body language. Now, this is a type of asgania. It's a type of inability to understand certain types of language. So he's not mentally retarded in any way. He's a pharmacist. He's a very successful guy, but his relationships with people are always hanging on an edge, and he doesn't understand why. And it seems that really the reason is something that he was probably born with it. It might be something impaired his development somewhere along the way. It could be that it was some kind of trauma from something physical that he endured, maybe a car accident, I don't know what. But he actually doesn't understand social cues. He doesn't understand body language. He'll look at this room, and if I ask him, what do you think is going on here? He might say, there's a group of women that are all thinking about the lunch they're going to make. Because they all look like they're inside themselves. What are they doing? You won't be able to put it together that if I'm talking and everyone looks attentive, so they're not daydreaming. They could be, but they're not daydreaming. They're listening to something. They're thinking about it. It could be that it'll lead them to lunch, but it's not their first concern. That's not where it came from. Now imagine this couple. There's this woman who is tremendously intelligent when it comes to body language, her own body language, other people's, in communication, and everything in her life is about this ability. In many ways, I asked her, what do you do? So she teaches young women and married women about how to have good relationships with their husbands.
Oh my God.
But she's very good at it because she makes them more aware of what they should pick up on and what they should see and what they can't, and so on. But sitting in plain view, she never heard of this because this is not her area, but she never heard there was such a thing that a person could be cognitively impaired and not able to see this. Well, he sees it, but he can't interpret it properly. And so the first thing, when I realized this, the first thing I tried to do was to get them to trade places. It's like, I want you now to go into his place and imagine what would your world look like if you didn't have the skills that you have. Like, try to imagine the world without this ability to express yourself, without this ability to understand people's body language, without that. And the first thing she felt was tremendous compassion. But and it's like suddenly there's a new understanding between them. At least from her point of view, he hasn't figured it out yet because he's still stuck on the. But he'll figure it out, and that this is, in a way, it's like the perfect couple. There's a lot of pain in it, but there's nobody who's more suited to actually have compassion, be able to, you can't really fix this, but you can teach all kinds of ways to deal with it. And the moment that someone feels that the other person understands where their handicap is, then they can begin to function better. Because they have room, they have space, they feel more safe. And so trading places is a tremendous technique if you can get it to happen in the right place. And if you trade places with someone, so you suddenly have a whole new world in your mind, and you see things in a completely different way. But the trick is that you can't really attain this, you can't really trade places without the light of Hashem shining down. Because as much as I'll say to someone, trade places, so they might do it for a moment, but without feeling, like in this couple for instance, that in the end this is hashgacha, this is divine providence that we're together. Because somebody could say, I'm not interested. I didn't sign up for this. Like, so this thing that you hear a lot. And if I don't want to have to deal with this handicap, it's not for me. I'm still young. I want to have a normal life. I don't want this. Why should I suffer from this? So I can't argue with it. That's what a person wants. What they want. But the real ability to trade places and to make it into a process that moves you forward comes from recognizing that Hashem wants this. That this was premeditated. It's not by mistake. It's not some kind of error. Okay? If you don't feel that Hashem wanted this, then you won't be able to trade places. You won't really be able to see the other person. You won't really be able to understand and use your abilities to help them. So that, in a nutshell, is trading places. That is souls. Because souls unite. That's the dimension of souls. When we talk about trading places, so we're talking about the ability of souls to unite. And unite here is not just that each one in and of itself is rectified, is coherent, is living in a world of rectification, and is able to have normal social interactions. Unification really means being able to work together, to become one. The two people can become one. And that requires this ability to trade places. Achlifu duchtayu is what it's called. But then when we think about God, just God in and of himself, so then we come to a higher level of oneness. And that oneness is already what we call nesi'at hafachim, or sustaining opposites, or living in paradox. Because God's oneness is even above that. It's not just the ability for two opposites to switch places. Because even when they switch places, they're only they're one or the other. It just doesn't matter. Now I'm me and now I'm you, but I can't be me and you at the same time. But by Hashem, by God, He is all these opposites at the same time. He does contain these paradoxes. That's already Chassidus. That's already the level of it's not just what the Arizal taught, this is what the Baal Shem Tov taught. So to attain oneness with God, I have to sustain paradox in myself. I have to be able to sustain opposites in myself. If I can't yet sustain opposites, then my oneness with God is at a lower level. I can't really become one with Him. The Rebbe Rashab once said that in order to be like Him, I have to know Him. What does it mean to know? How can you know God? So you can't know all of God. That's obviously not impossible. He didn't mean it like that. But to have a godly quality, I have to know the most important quality that He has. And the most important quality, as far as we're concerned, is His ability to sustain opposites at the same time. And so he said, if I could know Him in that sense, not just believe that He sustains opposites, but to actually sustain the opposites in myself, to be able to contain a paradox in myself, then I've reached a godly state. Okay. So these are three levels of oneness. In the self, in worlds, between souls, and with God. Okay. So now, if we look at at 7 different ways in which people trade places, again, this is just like an outline so that we can go deeper into these ideas as we go on. So the lowest form is trading bodies. It's actually a holy thing to trade. How can you trade bodies? So it's called ibur. It's literally called, there is such a thing, it's called ibur. The Tanya talks about it. That if I dwell very strongly on some mitzvah, then I could get an ibur. An ibur is like an impregnation of someone else's soul. It could come into my body and help me. So he says that since I wasn't born a tzaddik, so how could I be a tzaddik? Why, says the Tanya, asks, why am I talking to you about becoming a tzaddik? You couldn't become a tzaddik if you wanted to, because you have to be born that way. He says, yes, that's true, but you could be impregnated with the soul of a tzaddik. Ibur tzaddik. You get the tzaddik inside yourself. So that's like sharing bodies. You switch bodies. He has a body. He has his own body. But he can also inhabit mine. So it can also be something negative, right? There's something called the dibuk. And they used to say that all the, what we call today, mental illnesses, psychoses, all the different types of psychoses, they were called dibukim. Because why would it have... Because every illness is an unnatural state. The world was created, we just read last week, just on Shabbos, 3 days ago, we read Bereshit bara. That God created the world. And Rav Ginsburg talks about it all the time. That Bereshit bara means Bereshit bari. The world is created healthy. If there's sickness, it's an unnatural state. It doesn't belong to the world. Something somehow got confused here. Reb Nachman writes about that's why it's so hard to find cures for things. Because by definition, when there's an illness, it means that something's not natural. So how are you going to solve it with logical thinking? He says every type of cure, in a sense, has to go against logic. It's not logical. There's something about it that has to be not logical. I mean, you could follow many logical steps, but the chap at the end, the point at the end has got to be some kind of leap of understanding that nobody would have thought of normally.
Well, that's Hashem coming in.
You
It's
could
not
say
logical,
that's
it's not the
like the
natural
opposites,
state,
right?
So it's
Yeah.
Hashem.
It's like the paradox showing up somewhere,
Yeah.
right?
But I don't know what you're talking about. Okay, this beginning, this part about another tzaddik impregnating. I mean, can you say more on that?
Yeah, I can show you the.
If you dwell strong.
There's so many
with the
people that
mitzvah,
became Lubavitchers.
Yeah.
And the first thing they want to do is they want to mimic the Rebbe.
Oh.
What they feel is that this is what I want to be like. So they're like drawn to this very strongly.
Uh-huh.
And they say, I'd like to... So there's all kinds of attempts to do this. So first of all, everybody dresses in that way.
Uh-huh.
Okay. But the dress is very external. Then you can begin to have like some kind of... So my son was just at 770 for the holidays. He just came back last night. So I asked him, what was an interesting thing that happened? So he says, at Simchas Torah evening, Gilad Ardan, who's the Israeli ambassador to the UN, showed up. So I asked him, so what was it? How was he? He says it was phenomenal. He came in, and he got so sucked into the energy that he says he was standing. He wasn't standing on the Rebbe's bima, but he was standing in another bima, and he was clapping like the Rebbe, and he was shaking his hands. He was doing everything and he's so taken in by the whole thing. I mean, if you've been to Simchas Torah in 770, you know this is like the energy is like nowhere. I don't think there's anything like that in the world. So he really, really got into it. So he knows what the Rebbe looks like. Everybody knows already the Rebbe's motions, those things. That, in a sense, is a type of impregnation. Now, does that help you learn Talmud better? I don't know. But every time a Lubavitcher will say a mimer, he'll say it with the Rebbe's tune. He has a special tune that he says. And everybody says the same. It's very, but it goes further. There's a guy in the old city who decided that I'll use reverse engineering. If graphology, like the study of handwriting, tells me that the way that you write expresses your psyche. So I'll change my psyche by changing the way I write. So he studied the Rebbe's handwriting. He learned how to write the same way, thinking that this will do a reverse engineering and it'll fix it. So, okay. So people want this. It's not. Why do teenagers have posters of? I don't know if they do that anymore. They probably don't have posters anymore. Maybe they still do. I don't know what they do. So what do they have? At least in the 80s, they had posters on their walls because they idolize this. But they don't idolize it in the sense that, oh, I'm going to bow down to this. Say, this is what I want to be like. I want this to influence me. I want this to become part of me. Human beings have this very strong sense that you can take from someone else's energy and bring it into yourself. Okay, now you understand what I'm talking about?
Nice.
Okay.
Like quickly, Tzipor Tzadikim.
Sibur Tzadikim, right.
Sometimes
Right.
like you love them because you see how they think. You go, wow, and then hopefully it sticks.
And there, sometimes you say, like there were a lot of tzaddikim that said, I don't know how to do what they did, but I can tell the story. So just by telling the story, it's as if I did what they did, and it works. Yeah, okay. But there's a deeper type of this that we'll look at later. We won't get into it now. Between a teacher and student, it's much simpler. But with the Rebbe, it's a little bit like this, and we'll talk a little bit more about what type of trading places that is. When you trade bodies, it's as if your soul goes into someone else, and his soul goes into you. Then there's trading roles. And this This was the example I just gave about it with the husband and wife. But with husband and wife, a lot of times it's not so dramatic like the one I described. It could be something much simpler. There's one of the most difficult things for a couple to do is to realize that their roles are reversed. That their roles won't work if they follow the classical social construct. It just won't work. So if the woman will stay at home and the man goes out to work and develop a career, their couplehood will break apart. They won't be able to sustain the marriage. Now, usually, if they're not very, very rectified, it could take them 10, 15 years and close to a divorce to realize this. Or sometimes it's just necessity. God forbid one of them can't go out to work, whatever it is. But it usually doesn't come in an easy way. But if you're very rectified, or if you go to someone in Torah Nefesh, they could tell you, wait a minute, maybe you need to switch roles. So there's a big tzaddik not on this street, but on the next street, Ibn Shafut, not going to say what his name is. And he and his wife, from the time they got married, they switched roles. He's been at home with her now, V'ezrat Hashem. They have 11 children, soon they'll have 12. He's been at home all these years, learning. He learns at home, and he takes care of the house. How does a man take care of the house? Huh? It's not don't ask, but it's definitely not the way a woman would take care of the house. And she went out to teach, and she's a great teacher, and she's really loved, and she's very popular. So does she teach as well as he does? No, I don't think so. But still, she does something that he can't do, which is have a career. He couldn't do it. He tried. They tried a few times to switch back, and it always failed. It didn't work. So luckily, they were very rectified to begin with, and so they sort of slid into this situation. They didn't really have to, work it out. It sort of just happened. But sometimes you need to take like a week in order to really understand the your spouse, you need to switch sides. You need to take on the other side. You have to be able to do that. And when you're able to, so when it's a really rectified marriage, then it could be that, well, today Tati's the mommy, and mommy has to be somewhere else, so she's the Tati. She's out of the house. But sometimes you have to do that, and the kids get used to it. But sometimes it's not mommy who makes the food; it's Tati who does. It's something else. So that's a level of trading roles. Then there's why we're learning this now, because this is the parsha next week. Next week? I'm already 2 weeks ahead. So 2 weeks ahead. No, why? Yeah, 2 weeks from now. In Lech Lecha. Sorry, not in Lech Lecha, in 3 weeks. Vayero. And that's Avram and Yitzchak. And Avram and Yitzchak have to trade their character traits. And we'll talk more about that as we develop on. But they had to trade their loving kindness, their chesed, and their might, their yira. And Avram had to learn about yira, and Yitzchak had to learn about chesed. And so their whole relationship of going to Mount Moriah for Akedat Yitzchak, for the binding of Isaac, is about switching, trading their character traits, becoming the other. Then there's something that you could say all of Talmud is based on this. That sometimes you have to trade mindsets. You have to be able to train your minds. So I have a certain way of looking at things, and you have a certain way of looking at things, and sometimes we have to switch. And the classic example of that in the Talmud is that sometimes Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel switch their roles. So even though Beit Shammai is usually stringent and Beit Hillel is more lenient, there are a few cases in which it's the opposite. And whenever there's a machlokas, whenever there's a dispute between them, so one of the options that the Talmud comes up with is maybe uchlefa shita. Maybe we got them switched. Why is it so easy that maybe we got them switched? Because they know how to switch. They do know how to do this. So even though they have a primary mode of how to think about things, one is more stringent, one is more lenient, they know how to take the other side. But all of Talmudic thinking is to be able to switch sides. That's why you can't learn Talmud by yourself. I mean, you could, but you have to play both sides of the chessboard. Because every argument has a counter-argument. But to really understand the counter-argument and counter it again, you have to go into the mindset of the counter-argument. So yeah, you start with your way of thinking, then you have to switch to your chavrusas, to your study partner's way of thinking, then you switch back to yours, and you switch back and forth all the time. So all of somebody will call this maybe dialectical thinking, but it's not really dialectical. Because dialectical a person can do by themselves. This is really trading places. It's like you become your study partner, and then your study partner has to become you. Then there's trading wills. Ratzon. What I want. What do I will? What do I want? I have a whole set of things that I want, and somebody else has a different set of things that they want. So we could write a contract that would give each one of us a little bit of what we wanted. And we compromise. But compromise is not trading places. Trading places, it's like what the Alter Rebbe used to say. Well, I don't think he said it. But he has an interesting halacha in his Shulchan Aruch, and he writes that I can say the bracha for a talis for you. So you're going to put the talis on yourself, but I'll say the bracha for you. And what's the thinking there? The thinking there is that you and I could both fit under the talis. Now, what about if there's 5 people that are putting a talis on? Can I say the bracha for all 5 of them? So he says, yes. I can also say for all. How? Because we could all fit under one talis. I could say the bracha. What about 10? So theoretically, you could go to as many as you want. So that doesn't make any sense anymore. Because the principle, how could you fit under, how big is this talis? I mean, how many people can you get it? So the saying in Chassidus used to be that it all depends on what they're trying to do. If each one is trying to get the talis over him, so that won't work. You can't fit 10 people under one talis. But if every person is trying to get everyone else under the talis, so that'll work. So what are you doing? You're adopting someone else's will. You want the talis, but now I want what you want. And you want what I want, because you want me under the talis. Everyone wants what the other one wants. I was telling, before I was saying that this morning I had an argument with my wife. This is a very common argument that we have. We only have one car, and she had to go here, and I had to come here. She had to go there, and I had to come here. So the argument is always, who's going to take the car? So she says, you have to take the car. And I say, but you have to take the car. And she says, no, yours is father. And I say, no, yours is father. And we go on like this, and we waste 10 minutes. Until eventually I win. Usually. I try to win. I don't always get to win, but sometimes I do. So that's like why. Because it's not because we're so rectified. It's because we both have a problem looking at what we want. So we live through the other one. We live vicariously. So I live through what my wife wants. I say, okay, so that's what I want. I want her to go. But if you do that in a rectified way, that's what it means to live in a sense of being able to work with someone else. That I'm able to switch sides, but in my will and what I want. So that leads to teamwork. And we'll see more about that. Then, this is one that you didn't give an example for. This is all, again, as you know, these are all classes that Rav Ginsburg gave. So here he didn't give an example. We'll try to fill it in later. But there's also trading what we like. What we take pleasure in. So it's pretty clear. I mean, we had a series of 13 classes a long time ago, last year, on modesty, if you remember. And there, this really came in, that in intimate relationships, you have to trade pleasure. Meaning you have to think about what your partner finds pleasurable. You have to go into their point of view, and that's why that's what makes it so difficult between men and women, because it's very hard for men to understand what women want, and very hard for women to understand what men want. But that's the whole trick. And if you can do that, so that's the, I think that's why he didn't give the example, but that's the classic example of trading pleasure. But it could also be the same thing with what you cook at home. More simple things. And then there's trading beliefs, and this we'll talk about hopefully more next week, because next week is, I hope there's a class, but I think next week is the elections. So, trading beliefs is what you need in order to have elections. Why do you need that? Because belief, faith, emunah, so when we go to vote, we're voting for what we believe in. The truth is, in Israel, I don't know if anybody votes for what they believe in. They vote for the least distant thing from what they believe in. Nobody has that luxury of voting for what they believe in. So, how do you create peace? How do you create, we would say, achdus? How do you create unity after an election? Because what elections do is they bring out all the controversy, everything that we don't agree on, and it becomes very, very vocal, and sometimes more than that. So the only way you can really rectify this, because you want people, if you really rectified, we'd say, vote. You have to vote for the opposite of what you believe in, which is anyway what you vote for in Israel. It doesn't matter. But if you were in America, so you would say, if I'm a Republican, I have to vote Democrat, and if I'm Democrat, I have to vote Republican. You have to vote, but that aside, after the election, there has to be a feeling that I can completely trade places with the guy who voted for the exact opposite from what I voted for. If I can't do that, then that's how societies deteriorate.
Yeah.
So it could be like in New Zealand, I don't know what they vote for. They probably don't care.
Sheep.
Sheep, I don't know. They don't care. You voted this or you voted that, probably doesn't matter. So they have no trouble keeping unity afterwards, because in the end, who cares? But the more contentious the issues, the more difficult it is to create the unity afterwards. And you have to have this ability to trade places. And to understand why the other side voted the way... If you can't understand it, which is unfortunately the case by many, many people, so you're tearing society apart. So it's the highest level of souls unifying. Yeah.
I have just one thing. I mean, because you kind of said, I don't want to get into it, but what if something, let's say, I'm going extreme, Hitler, would you want to, you had the whole, right, like, look what came up, would you want to really trade places with something that might be, like, evil or bad? No, stop in general, not related.
So we're assuming that things are within some
but
kind
then
of
you wouldn't.
within some kind of range of reason.
Normal.
Yeah, I mean, if something is like that, I don't.
Okay.
There's this whole thing now that they've been doing this for a while now. That even in like the classical, right? There's the classical hero and the villain, right? So there's a whole genre now, and it's like of getting into the villain's mind. The villain's actually, I want to trade places. I want to understand why he does what he does. So some of it is, some of it makes sense, but a lot of it is just is already not understand. But we'll say it like this: that every one of these categories can deteriorate into something very negative. So when we talked about trading bodies, for instance, so that is one of the roots of people having this need to change their bodies. Because at the root of it, it's to become the tzaddik. But it's an adoration of the tzaddik. But it could become, like for many men that become transgender, so it's an adoration of the female. And so they begin to identify with it so much, they want to be that. So that's a deterioration of this concept. Each one of these concepts can deteriorate. You could also get trading roles that becomes between husband and wife that becomes deteriorated. And what would that look like? So I can't think of it offhand, but each one of these can deteriorate into a lower state. Okay.
Rabbi, what is the subtitle, the hidden bold substance?
Oh, okay. So the hidden bold substance is a Kabbalistic concept which is based on a verse in Habakkuk, in the prophet Habakkuk, and it's considered by the Arizal to be the closest you can, the connotation of God's substance, as it were. And so the whole point here is that for any of these trades to work, these switching sides to work, there has to be an illumination from that substance. That's what we meant before when we said you have to bring God into the picture. Otherwise this won't work. So for instance, politically, if you don't believe in the end that all the Jewish people are in the end people of God, so I don't know if here the contention is the worst. But we can allow that because we hope that in the end every Jew feels that I could trade places with the other one because we all have one Father, as it were. We all come from one place, so it works. If you don't have that illumination from Hashem's substance, none of these trades will work. Okay. Now, I can't hold back from passing this one out too. I didn't make enough. But I'll bring this next time because we're not going to talk about it today. No, it's okay. It's fine.
I mean, no, I mean the other one.
Oh no, I have it home. It's fine. Oh, you want it?
That one. Because
Now
just
I
this
understand
week.
what you're saying.
I'll give it back next
Yeah.
week. But this week I'll
You can keep it.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so what is this? This is a summary of the entire Torah. So I'm sorry, I'll bring more next week. We're not gonna really do much more than just look at it. And
Take a photograph of it.
Pardon?
yeah, I'll bring it tomorrow next week. I'll put it
Oh,
on.
thank you.
I'll send it on the WhatsApp. These are the main topics in the Torah, in Chamisha Chumshei Torah, what's called the Pentateuch. And what the Rav did here is he ordered them based on the Sfirot. And you see here that the Keter is very, very big. That the Keter here it contains all the two universal parshas that we're in now, Bereshis and Noach, which are not, they're before Abraham, so they're universal. And they include the whole crown. And the crown has many aspects to it, the creation of man, and so on. But then, what we'll see, hopefully, if you guys don't get tired of this topic too early, is that each one of these has, how did he choose these? That each one of these has one of these types of trading places. And the one that's easiest is one that we just mentioned, is Isaac's binding, the one that's here in loving kindness, he put it, right? No, in wisdom, sorry. He put it in wisdom. Why in wisdom? Because it required them to have complete self-nullification to be able to achieve this. Because this was a particular change of character. This is true in all the time, that if you want to be able to change your character, you have to go back to a state before you have character. That's what self-nullification is. We always have to explain this. There's two types of nullification. There's nullification in the sense of, I am nullified to your will, Hashem, I do what you want. That is the usual type of nullification discussed in Chassidus. But there is what we call the nullification of being. Self-nullification of my own being. I'm no longer who I am. That's what I always talk about when we talk about Shema. We talked about this 5-6 weeks ago. When I cover my eyes, I'm covering my eyes because I don't want to be. I want to eliminate my being. I want there only to be Hashem. Right? In the East, when you eliminate your being, what's left? Nothing. Because there's only you. In Yiddishkeit, when you eliminate yourself, then you come to the real reality of the world, which is God. Then you feel the true being of the world. So if you can go into that state, which is called Ayin, it's called nothingness, even though it's not nothingness. It's the most, sometimes in Chassidus it's called the absolute nothingness. Why do they call it absolute? Because it's absolute like God is absolute. So if you can go into this state, you can come out a different person. So if before your primary character trait was on the right side, you were like loving kindness, so when you go into this state, you could come out with might, with the other side, with the left side. That's how you trade places there. So we'll see this in more detail next time. But that each one of these events, each one of these stories and topics in the Torah is a story of trading places. That's how he chose these. And you could say in general that they're the most important stories, topics in the Torah. But what they have in common is that each one of them illustrates another form of trading places. Each one is one of these 8. One of these 7, sorry. I'm wondering if we should continue. We've been talking for an hour already. And no. Let's leave it here, and God willing, we'll resume next week. It's a good place to stop. Yeah, sure.
Not next week.
Why not next week? It's a great day to have a class. I was hoping that it would be okay. Yeah.
Minalea. No, I didn't mean.
No,
No, I wasn't. Yeah, I mean about changing.
how far does it go?
How far can you go to say I can understand your viewpoint?
Is it, I mean, if you, for example, if there is
They would like to eat dinner by 6:30. So,
murderer,
so 5
Mm-hmm.
is good for me.
you still have to treat places.
Right?
So, why not go? You have to then go to the worst scenario.
Because here you're talking about actions. They're a little bit different than beliefs. I'm assuming, I hope, that even if a person has acted in an atrocious way, they don't believe that that's the right way to act. If they do believe that that's the right way to act, I don't think I can help them. I'll find it very, very difficult to bring them into a different... I mean, it's not therapy that they need. It's something a lot deeper than that. So, right. So when it comes to actions, it's a lot more complex. So I'm not sure that I can help someone whose actions express their beliefs, and that is their belief system. That it is true and proper to kill people. I have a very... I'm not saying that it's impossible, but I won't achieve it by taking their point of view. I have to do something else. That's the point. The point is, I might be able to help them, but not by assuming their beliefs. Okay. On the other hand, when somebody is a leftist, if I can't understand I can understand their beliefs 100%. I understand exactly what they want, and I disagree. I have my set of beliefs. But I certainly understand where they're coming from. I don't think for a moment that I need to fight them. I think maybe I could convince them, maybe not. But I see the legitimacy in where they are. I don't think that it's something so far-fetched. Okay, so hope to see everyone after they voted, before they voted, whatever, next week.
So next week or in 2 weeks?
No, next week.
Next week.
If it's okay with you.
Yeah, no, I'm fine.
You don't have a ballot here or something?
Definitely, no, I'm not having voting here in this department.
Okay, good.
I take one of each.
Yeah, sure.